The storm had come without warning. The sky above the colony world had turned dark in a matter of minutes, and heavy winds swept across the open streets. Rain pounded like stones, and the sound of thunder rolled through the ground. Most of the people had already rushed into their homes or the nearest safety stations, but Aaron had been too far away from either. He ran with all his strength, his boots splashing through muddy water. The wind nearly pushed him off his feet, and the rain soaked through his jacket. He knew he would not make it back to his post in time. The only place nearby that could protect him was the storm tunnel system, old underground passages built long ago to handle floods and winds. Aaron reached the wide concrete entrance just as the storm grew worse. He stepped inside, his chest rising and falling quickly from running. The tunnel was dark, but compared to the storm outside, it felt safe. The walls were rough and wet, and water dripped from cracks above. He took a deep breath of relief, glad to be away from the roaring winds. But he was not alone. Farther inside, a soft light flickered. At first, Aaron thought it was just the reflection of lightning, but then he saw a figure sitting against the wall, a small lantern glowing beside her. She was not human. Her skin carried a faint silver tone that seemed to catch the light, and her eyes glowed faintly, like stars hidden behind mist. She looked at him with surprise, her long hair damp from the storm. Aaron froze for a moment. He had seen her kind before in the colony markets, but only from a distance. They were travelers, living between human settlements and their own camps. He had never spoken to one. The girl sat up straighter, clearly as cautious as he was. Her hand rested on the lantern, and her gaze followed his every move. I didn't mean to intrude," Aaron said, his voice echoing slightly in the tunnel. He raised his hands to show he carried nothing threatening. "I just needed shelter from the storm." The girl tilted her head, studying him. For a moment, only the storm outside filled the silence. Then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "The tunnel is large. There is space for two." Aaron nodded quickly. He did not want to leave. The storm outside made that impossible, but he also did not want to anger her. Carefully, he sat down on the opposite side of the tunnel, leaving enough distance to show respect. The rain roared against the entrance, and water trickled in, forming small streams along the floor. The air was cold and damp, and the shadows from the lantern danced along the walls. Aaron glanced at her from time to time. She seemed calm, though her eyes kept flicking toward him as if making sure he did not come closer. She held herself with quiet pride, her back straight despite the hard wall behind her. After several minutes, Aaron cleared his throat. "The storm came fast. I almost didn't make it here." The girl did not answer at first. Then, slowly, she said, "Storms do not warn. They simply arrive." Her words carried a strange rhythm, almost like poetry. Aaron found himself listening closely. He wanted to ask her name, but he sensed she might not tell him yet. So he kept his voice gentle. "Do you travel often during storms?" She shook her head lightly, strands of wet hair moving across her face. "I was on my way to the river camp. The sky turned before I could reach it." Aaron gave a small smile. "Seems the storm wanted us both here." The girl looked at him for a moment, then turned her eyes back to the lantern. He wondered if she found his words foolish, but at least she had not sent him away. Time passed slowly. The thunder above sounded like mountains breaking apart. Each rumble made the tunnel tremble slightly, but it still felt safer than being outside. The air smelled of wet stone and earth. Aaron leaned back against the wall, trying to relax, but his thoughts kept drifting to the girl across from him. He wondered what her people were like, what kind of life she lived. Humans and her kind often crossed paths, yet they rarely truly spoke. Now, trapped in the same tunnel, it felt strange, two different worlds sharing the same small shelter. Neither of them spoke much more that night, but silence was better than loneliness. Slowly, Aaron grew used to her presence. The sound of the storm outside became less frightening with someone else nearby. When his eyes finally began to close, he thought one last time about the way her eyes had glowed in the dim lantern light like stars shining deep in the storm. The storm did not calm. Hours passed, yet the rain outside still poured with wild force, and the sound of thunder grew louder with each strike. Inside the storm tunnel, the walls seemed to shake whenever lightning split the sky. Water dripped steadily from cracks in the ceiling, forming tiny streams that ran along the ground. Aaron sat with his back against the wall, his jacket pulled tightly around him. The cold crept into his bones, but what unsettled him more was the silence between him and the girl across the tunnel. She sat with her lantern close by, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her silver-toned skin catching the weak glow. Her eyes flickered every so often toward him, then quickly away. It was not anger he saw in her, but caution. He understood it. Humans and her kind were not enemies, but they were not close friends either. Trade brought them together, yet trust rarely followed. Here, inside this tunnel, they were two strangers forced together by the storm. Aaron tried to rest, but the quiet pressed heavily against him. The storm outside was loud, but inside the tunnel the pauses between thunder seemed endless. He felt he should say something, anything to make the silence easier. He cleared his throat softly. "Do you think it will end before morning?" The girl raised her eyes to him. Her gaze lingered for a moment, sharp but not unkind. "Storms last as long as they choose," she answered calmly. Her voice carried a steady rhythm, almost like water flowing over stones. Aaron gave a small nod. "That's true. On my world, storms were never this fierce. Here, it feels like the sky is trying to tear the ground apart." She tilted her head slightly. "Then why come here, if you do not like the storms?" Her question caught him off guard. He gave a faint smile, half tired, half amused. "I didn't choose the storms. I chose the colony work. And the storms came with it?" The girl looked at him for another moment, then lowered her gaze back to the lantern. The silence returned, but now it felt different, less heavy, more thoughtful. Aaron leaned his head against the damp wall, listening to the steady rhythm of rain. His eyes followed the small rivulets of water crawling across the ground. After a while, curiosity tugged at him. He glanced toward her again. "What about you? Why travel during weather like this?" Her expression softened, though she did not smile. "I did not expect the sky to break. I was on the way to my family near the river camp. The path is usually safe." Aaron nodded slowly. "I see." He hesitated, then added, "It must be important, to travel so far." She lifted her chin slightly, pride glowing faintly in her silver eyes. "Family is always important." Something in her voice struck Aaron, firm, yet warm. He thought of his own family back on Earth, far beyond the stars, people he had not seen in years. For a moment, the storm seemed quieter as the memory filled his chest. Neither of them spoke again for a long while. The only sounds were the crack of thunder and the drip of water echoing through the tunnel. The lantern's flame flickered weakly, casting their shadows on the walls. At one point, Aaron shifted, trying to get comfortable on the hard stone. His boot slipped against the wet ground, making a sharp scrape. The girl's eyes immediately flashed toward him, alert. "Sorry," he said quickly. "Didn't mean to startle you." She gave a small nod, her posture easing again. Aaron realized then how tense she must have felt, sharing this space with a human stranger. He wanted to ease that tension, even just a little. He pulled his small pack closer and opened it, taking out a sealed ration bar. He broke it in half and held one piece out toward her. The girl's eyes narrowed slightly. She did not move at first. "It's safe," Aaron said, keeping his voice gentle. "Not the best taste, but it keeps you warm." For a moment, it seemed she would refuse. But then, slowly, she reached out and accepted the piece. Her fingers brushed against his briefly cooler than human skin, yet steady. She examined the ration carefully before taking a small bite. Her expression shifted just a little. "It is dry." Aaron chuckled softly. "Yeah. That's the polite way to put it." For the first time, a hint of a smile touched her lips. It was faint, but it made the tunnel feel a little less cold. The storm outside still raged, but the uneasy silence inside began to change. It was no longer the silence of strangers keeping distance. It was the silence of two people learning how to share the same space, each slowly testing trust. As the thunder rolled once more, Aaron leaned back and let his eyes rest. He knew the storm would last long into the night, but somehow, he felt less alone. Across the tunnel, the girl sat quietly, her lantern between them, her eyes softer now than when he had first arrived. In the heart of the storm, two strangers had begun to cross the first bridge of understanding. The night dragged on, and the storm showed no sign of resting. Rain hammered against the world outside, and the roar of the wind pushed through the tunnel like a beast trying to claw its way in. Inside, the air grew colder with each passing hour. The damp stone walls held no warmth, and the steady drip of water only made the chill stronger. Aaron rubbed his hands together and breathed into them, trying to hold back the shivers. He glanced at the girl across from him. She sat with her knees drawn close, her lantern still glowing faintly beside her. The silver shine of her skin looked dimmer now, and he could tell the cold was reaching her too, though she tried to hide it. Aaron hesitated for a moment, then reached for his pack. "This tunnel will freeze us if we don't make some heat," he said. His voice sounded rough in the silence. "I've got a kit for fire." The girl's eyes lifted to him, uncertain. "Fire?" "Yes," Aaron replied. He held up a small steel case, showing her the tools inside: flint, a bit of dry cloth, and a chemical starter. "Not a big one. Just enough to keep us warm." For a moment, she said nothing, her eyes fixed on the items in his hands. Then she gave a slow nod. "Fire is welcome." Aaron gathered what little dry material he could find: broken wood from an old support beam, bits of cloth from his spare pack lining. Carefully, he built a small pile in the center of the tunnel floor, away from the water streams. His fingers worked quickly, striking the flint against the starter until a tiny spark caught. He blew softly, shielding the flame with his hands until it grew. Soon, a weak but steady fire flickered in the darkness. The glow spread across the tunnel walls, pushing back the heavy shadows. The air grew warmer, and for the first time that night, Aaron felt his body relax. The girl shifted closer, though not too close. She kept a careful distance, but her eyes softened as she extended her hands toward the flame. The firelight reflected in her eyes, making them shine even brighter. "Better," Aaron said with a small smile. Almost feels like we're not trapped in a storm tunnel anymore. She gave the faintest nod, her expression calm but less guarded than before. After a pause, she asked, "Do humans always carry fire with them?" Aaron chuckled. "Not always. But it's useful. My people learned long ago that fire could mean survival. Without it, we wouldn't have lasted through cold nights or dark places." Her eyes lowered slightly, thoughtful. "My people read the stars. We do not carry fire, but we follow light in the sky. It shows us where to go and when to rest." Aaron leaned forward a little, curious. "You can read the stars? Like a map?" "Yes," she said simply. "Every star speaks. They tell us of storms, of safe rivers, of places where food grows." She paused, her gaze flicking to the flame. "But in tunnels, there are no stars." Her words carried a quiet weight, and Aaron felt a strange connection form in that moment. He thought of his own ancestors on Earth, crossing oceans with only the stars to guide them. Perhaps her people and his were not so different after all. He reached into his pack again and pulled out another ration. This time, when he offered her a piece, she accepted it more quickly. They ate quietly, the fire crackling between them. The taste was still dry and plain, but in the warmth of the flames, it seemed less unpleasant. After a while, Aaron told her a story. He spoke of the old Earth sailors who once set out across endless seas with only the wind and stars as their guides. He explained how humans had feared the unknown waters but sailed anyway, finding new lands and building new lives. She listened closely, her silver eyes fixed on him. When he finished, she tilted her head slightly. "Your people, they were not afraid." Aaron smiled faintly. "They were afraid. But they kept going anyway. That's how humans are. Even when afraid, we try to move forward." For the first time, the girl let out a soft sound almost like laughter. It was quiet, almost hidden, but it carried warmth that made the tunnel feel brighter than the fire. "What is your name?" she asked suddenly. The question surprised him. He straightened a little before answering. "Aaron." "And yours?" She hesitated, then said, "Myra." The name lingered in the air, soft and graceful. Aaron repeated it gently, as if testing the shape of it. "Myra." She gave a small nod, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before turning back to the fire. The storm outside still raged with no mercy, but inside the tunnel, something had changed. The silence that had once felt heavy now carried warmth. The fire crackled, and two strangers no longer nameless sat together, sharing food, stories, and a fragile thread of trust. For the first time since entering the tunnel, Aaron felt the weight of the storm ease. It was still there, wild and powerful, but it no longer seemed as terrifying. With the fire between them and Myra across from him, the night felt survivable. And in that shared warmth, a bond had quietly begun. The fire burned low, its warm glow fighting against the damp air. Aaron and Myra sat close to it, both quiet now after sharing stories and food. For a short while, the storm outside seemed less frightening. But tunnels were not built only for shelter, they carried dangers of their own. A sudden roar of thunder shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the walls groaned as if the earth itself were alive. Aaron glanced toward the entrance of the tunnel, but all he saw was a flood of rain pouring down, the wind screaming behind it. The water at their feet, once just small streams, began to grow stronger. Myra's eyes followed the streams, and her voice lowered. "The tunnel is filling." Aaron leaned forward, checking the ground. The trickles of water now formed thin rivers, crawling faster with each minute. His stomach tightened. We can't stay here. If the water rises, this chamber will drown us. The fire sputtered as drops of water landed close, and Myra quickly reached out to protect her lantern. She stood, her long hair clinging wet to her shoulders, her expression calm but sharp. There is another path deeper inside. I saw it when I came earlier. Aaron grabbed his pack and stood as well. Then that's where we go. The storm raged louder as if it wanted to chase them. Aaron kicked dirt over the fire to put it out, and together they stepped farther into the darkness of the tunnel. Myra's lantern was their only light now, its glow weak but steady. Shadows stretched across the walls like shapes waiting to move. The deeper they went, the narrower the path became. The ground was slippery, covered in mud and loose stone. Every step echoed, mixing with the growl of rushing water behind them. The air smelled heavier here, damp and earthy, and the ceiling hung lower. Aaron walked slightly ahead, his hand brushing against the wall to guide himself. Myra followed close, holding the lantern high so the light reached them both. Her breathing was quiet but even, though he could feel her caution. At one bend, a loud splash made them both stop. The sound had not come from their own steps. Aaron turned his head quickly, eyes narrowing into the dark. Did you hear that? Myra held the lantern higher, her silver eyes sharp. Yes. Something moves? They stood still, the storm's distant roar filling the silence. Then, from the shadows, came a low hiss. It was not thunder. It was something alive. Myra's lantern caught movement along, slick shape sliding across the water. Its scales glistened in the faint light. Aaron's chest tightened. He had heard stories of the tunnel beasts, creatures that lived in the underground streams, hiding until storms drove them out. He had never seen one, until now. The creature lifted its head, eyes glowing faintly, its body coiling through the water. Its hiss turned into a deep rumble, and Aaron realized it was preparing to strike. Back, he whispered urgently. Stay behind me. Myra did not argue. She stepped slightly back but kept the lantern lifted, giving him light. Aaron grabbed a broken piece of stone from the ground and held it like a weapon. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay steady. The creature slithered closer, its body scraping against stone. When it lunged, Aaron swung the stone with all his strength. It struck the creature's side with a sharp crack, and the beast recoiled, hissing louder. Water splashed across them both as its tail whipped violently. Run! Aaron shouted. They sprinted down the tunnel, their footsteps splashing through the rising water. The lantern swung wildly in Myra's hand, throwing scattered light across the walls. Behind them, the hiss grew louder, echoing through the tunnel as the beast gave chase. The path narrowed again, forcing them to press against the walls to move forward. The water rose to their knees now, pulling at their legs. Aaron grabbed Myra's arm to steady her as she nearly slipped on the slick stone. She clutched the lantern tightly, refusing to let it fall. At last, they stumbled into a wider chamber. Aaron pulled her to the side, both of them breathing hard. For a moment, the tunnel behind them was silent except for the rush of water. Then, slowly, the hissing sound faded. The beast had not followed into the chamber. Aaron leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. That was closer than I liked. Myra set the lantern down carefully, her face calm though her breath was quick. You fought it without fear. Aaron gave a small, tired laugh. I was afraid. Trust me. Her eyes softened as she studied him, the fire of the lantern reflecting in her silver gaze. But you still stood. Fear did not stop you. Aaron met her gaze, and for a moment the storm outside felt far away. It was just the two of them, alive, together, in a place where most would not survive. The water still rushed at their feet, but the danger of the beast had passed for now. They both knew the storm would continue testing them, yet something had already shifted. Myra no longer looked at Aaron as just a stranger. She looked at him as someone she could trust in the dark. And in the heart of the storm tunnel, that trust grew stronger with every step. The chamber offered a short relief, but it was not safety. Water kept pouring in, swirling around their legs. Each drop from the ceiling felt heavier, and the sound of the storm above echoed through the stone like a drumbeat. The air was damp, thick, and heavy. Aaron scanned the walls with his hand, searching for another path. "This chamber won't last long," he said, his voice tense. "If the water rises any higher, we'll be trapped." Myra lifted the lantern, its soft glow pushing back the shadows. Her silver eyes searched the walls with care. At the far side of the chamber, she pointed to a narrow shaft that reached upward like a jagged crack in the stone. "There," she said firmly. Aaron followed her gaze. The shaft stretched high, barely wide enough for a person to climb. It looked unstable, but it was the only way out. He took a deep breath. "That's our chance." The water reached their knees now, cold and biting. Aaron waded toward the shaft, testing the stone with his hand. It was slick and rough at the same time, but it offered enough holds. He turned to Myra. "You go first. I'll boost you up." Myra hesitated, holding the lantern close. "And if you cannot follow?" Aaron gave her a steady look, forcing a small smile. "Then at least one of us makes it out. But don't worry. I'll climb." For a moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on him. Then she gave a short nod, trust clear in her eyes. Aaron braced himself against the wall and laced his fingers together. Myra stepped carefully into his grip, her wet hair clinging to her shoulders. With a firm push, he lifted her upward. She reached for the stone, her hands finding small ledges, her body pulling itself higher. The lantern swung at her side, casting wild shadows as she climbed. Aaron kept his hands raised, ready to steady her if she slipped. The water continued to rise around him, now splashing against his waist. The roar of the storm pressed harder against the tunnel, making the walls tremble. "Keep going, Myra," he called up. She climbed with care, her movements quick but steady. At last, she reached a flat ledge above the chamber. Setting the lantern down, she leaned back over the shaft. "Your turn, Aaron." He gritted his teeth, wiping water from his eyes. His muscles already ached from the cold, but he pushed himself forward. With a firm grip on the rough stone, he began to climb. His boots slipped on the wet surface more than once, but he held on, forcing himself upward. Halfway up, his foot missed a hold. He slipped, the cold water below waiting to swallow him. His heart raced as his body slammed against the stone wall, his hands clinging desperately to a small crack. "Aaron." Myra's voice rang down from above, sharp with fear. "I've got it," he shouted, though his arms shook from the strain. Myra reached down, stretching her arm toward him. "Take my hand." He climbed one step higher, then reached for her. Their hands met, her grip strong despite her slender frame. With her pulling and him pushing upward, Aaron finally managed to reach the ledge. He collapsed beside her, his chest heaving with exhaustion. For a moment, they just sat there, water dripping from their clothes, their breaths mixing in the damp air. The storm outside still howled, but here, above the rising flood, there was a fragile sense of safety. Aaron turned his head toward Myra, a tired smile spreading across his face. "Told you I'd make it?" Myra let out a soft sound, almost a laugh. "You are stubborn, human." He chuckled weakly. "I've been told that before." They picked up the lantern and looked ahead. The shaft opened into another passage, smaller but drier. The ground here was uneven, but at least the water did not chase them. Together, they moved forward, their steps echoing softly in the narrow space. As they walked, the silence between them felt different than before. It was no longer the silence of strangers or even of cautious allies. It was the silence of two people who had held onto each other at the edge of danger and survived together. After some time, they reached a place where the tunnel widened into a slope leading upward. A faint breath of air brushed against their faces, fresh air, cool and clean. They both stopped, realizing what it meant. "The surface," Aaron whispered. Myra raised the lantern higher, her silver eyes bright with relief. "The storm will not keep us forever." They climbed slowly, the lantern's light guiding them. When they finally reached the top, a crack in the stone showed a glimpse of the outside world. Lightning flashed across the sky, and rain still poured, but the worst of the storm had begun to pass. Aaron and Myra stood side by side, breathing deeply, their hearts still racing from what they had escaped. The storm had not won. Together, they had climbed, fought, and survived. And in that shared struggle, something stronger than fear had been born. The storm had finally passed. Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the wind had softened into a whisper. The colony world looked washed clean, the streets shimmering with water and reflecting the faint light of the clearing sky. For the first time in many hours, Aaron and Myra could breathe without fear, without listening for the sudden roar of thunder or the hiss of rushing water. They stepped carefully from the tunnel's stone exit, wet boots squelching against the muddy ground. Aaron glanced around, taking in the sight of broken branches, puddles, and the scattered debris left behind by the storm. Myra followed closely, her lantern still in hand. Its glow now felt almost unnecessary, as the dawn light began to filter through the clouds. The air smelled fresh and earthy, carrying a sense of calm that had been missing for so long. Birds cautiously returned to the treetops, their calls faint but steady, a reminder that life continued despite the storm's rage. Aaron looked at Myra, noting the damp strands of her hair clinging to her face and shoulders. She seemed small, yet resilient, like a plant that had survived through harsh weather. He smiled softly, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fading cold. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly, his voice breaking the calm in the best way, soft but sincere. Myra's silver eyes met his, thoughtful and steady. "You were brave," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Even when the tunnel flooded, you did not panic. You kept moving forward." Aaron shrugged lightly. "I was scared. I just didn't show it." She tilted her head, considering him. "Fear does not make a person weak. It is what they do in the face of it that shows their strength." He nodded, realizing how true her words were. Together, they had faced the rising water, the beast in the tunnel, and the dangerous climb. Each obstacle had tested their courage and their trust in each other. For a long moment, they walked in silence, letting the quiet of the post-storm world settle around them. Every step splashed through puddles, and every breath felt fresh and clean. The chaos of the storm was behind them, yet the bond it had created remained. Myra stopped and looked at Aaron, her gaze distant. "I never thought a human could be like this," she said softly. Aaron raised an eyebrow, curious. "Like what?" She gave a small shrug. "Calm under pressure. Determined. Caring." He felt a warmth rise in his chest, something he had not expected in the middle of a storm tunnel just hours ago. "I could say the same about you," he admitted. "You were brave too. You stayed calm, guided me through the path, and never gave up." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, they shared a look that said more than words ever could. The storm had driven them together, and now, in its quiet aftermath, they could see each other clearly, not just as strangers, not just as human and alien, but as two individuals who had faced danger and survived together. The path ahead was muddy, lined with broken branches and puddles reflecting the morning sky. Yet, for the first time, it felt open rather than threatening. Aaron stepped forward, offering Myra a hand. She accepted it without hesitation, and together they walked slowly toward the colony buildings, their boots squelching through the wet ground. "Do you think your family is safe?" Aaron asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Myra nodded. "Yes. They stayed in the higher camps. The storm did not reach them fully." "And your people?" "They will recover," she said. "Storms are dangerous, but they pass. Life continues afterward." Aaron looked at her, feeling the truth of her words. Life had continued for them too. Despite the fear, the cold, and the danger, they were here. Together. They reached a small hill overlooking the colony, where puddles reflected the soft light of the clearing sky. Both paused, taking in the scene. The storm had left the world changed, yet somehow more beautiful, brighter in its calm after the chaos. Myra lowered the lantern, letting its light mingle with the soft dawn. "It is peaceful now," she said. Aaron nodded. "Yes. And I'm glad we made it through. Together." She looked at him, her gaze steady, and gave a faint smile. Together. For a long moment, they just stood there, side by side, listening to the quiet world. No words were necessary. The bond formed in the storm's heart needed no explanation. It was enough that they had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and had found courage in each other. The sun began to break through the clouds, casting golden light across the wet landscape. The storm tunnels behind them were silent now, hiding the chaos that had raged within. But the memory of survival, trust, and quiet companionship remained. Aaron turned to Myra, a thought crossing his mind. "When the next storm comes, will you come back?" She looked at him, silver eyes reflecting the dawn. "Yes. I will come back. Not just for safety, but to see you again." A small smile spread across his face, and Myra returned it, their connection unspoken yet clear. The storm had tested them, and in its passing, it had left something stronger: hope, trust, and the beginning of something more. And for the first time that day, the world seemed truly calm, peaceful, and full of promise. The sun had fully risen, casting soft golden light across the wet streets of the colony. The storm was gone, leaving behind only the sound of dripping water from rooftops and the faint rustle of leaves still slick with rain. The world seemed quieter now, calm, and fresh. Aaron and Myra stood at the edge of the colony's small hill, overlooking the glistening streets. Their clothes were still damp, their hair clinging in wet strands, but neither cared. For hours, they had survived the storm together, and now they were finally safe. Neither spoke at first. Words felt unnecessary in the bright, peaceful morning. The shared struggle of the night had created a bond far stronger than any simple conversation could convey. Finally, Myra broke the silence. "I must return to my family today," she said, her voice soft but steady. Aaron nodded. "I understand. And I have duties in the colony too." He hesitated, feeling a weight in his chest. "But I don't want to leave without a promise." Myra's silver eyes searched his face. "A promise?" she asked. "Yes," Aaron said. "The storm brought us together. And I want to see you again. I want to know that we will meet, not just by chance in the tunnels." Myra studied him carefully, her expression thoughtful. Then, slowly, she smiled, a small, gentle curve of her lips that warmed him more than the sunlight ever could. "I will return," she said. "When the next great storm comes, I will meet you at the tunnel entrance." Aaron's heart lifted. "I will wait," he replied, his voice steady despite the nervous hope in his chest. For a moment, they just stood there, side by side, the wind softly moving through the trees around them. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, giving them this quiet moment to share. Myra shifted slightly, lifting the lantern she had carried through the storm. She held it between them, the soft glow still flickering despite the sunlight. "This lantern," she said, "guided me through darkness. It will guide me back to you too." Aaron smiled. "Then I'll be here, waiting. Rain or shine." A gentle breeze blew past, carrying with it the fresh scent of earth and wet leaves. For Aaron, it was more than just air, it felt like a promise itself, the world affirming the bond they had formed. Myra's gaze softened as she looked at him. "We survived the storm together. And now, we begin something new, something stronger than fear or danger." Aaron nodded, feeling a warmth inside that had nothing to do with the sun. "Yes. Something stronger." For a while, they simply watched the colony. Children cautiously returned to play in puddles, workers began repairing broken paths, and birds sang softly in the trees. Life went on. And somewhere deep inside, both of them knew that their lives would go on together as well, in ways neither could yet fully imagine. Aaron held out his hand. Myra looked at it, then slowly placed hers in his. The contact was light, yet it carried more meaning than words ever could. A promise, a trust, a shared understanding of what had passed and what was yet to come. "Until the next storm," Aaron said quietly. "Until the next storm," Myra repeated, her voice sure and calm. The sun rose higher, illuminating the wet streets with golden light. Their reflections shimmered in the puddles, two shapes side by side, connected by what had begun in the storm's darkness. The world was alive, bright, and full of hope. Finally, they stepped apart, knowing that their paths must diverge for now. Myra began walking toward her family's camp, lantern swinging gently at her side. Aaron turned back toward the colony, his mind already thinking of the next meeting, of the promise they had made. Though they moved in opposite directions, neither felt alone. The storm had tested them, but it had also shown them courage, trust, and the possibility of something beautiful. And that, they both understood, would last far longer than the storm itself. As they walked, each step felt lighter, carrying with it hope and anticipation. The memory of the storm would remain, but so would the knowledge that they had found each other, survived together, and created a bond stronger than fear or distance. And when the next storm came, Aaron and Myra would meet again, ready to face whatever challenges awaited, together. The world was calm now, but the promise of the future shone brighter than the morning sun.